She slid the ring off her finger slowly, like peeling away a piece of her own skin, and placed it on the glass counter. Her hands were trembling. There was a pale mark on her ring finger where the band had sat for 7 years, a ghost of a promise that no longer lived there. The man behind the counter gave her $12. $12 for 7 years of love, of hope, of everything she once believed in. She took the money and walked out, because her 2 children were sitting at home with empty stomachs, waiting for her to bring back something to eat. But the man who bought that ring for $12 would walk back into her life 3 months later, and nothing would ever be the same. What happens when the last thing you have left to sell is the memory of the love that broke you? Stay with me, because this story will remind you why giving up is never the answer. This is the story of a single mother named Denise and a $12 wedding ring. Sometimes the things we sell in desperation become the seeds of something we never imagined. It was a cold Thursday night in Memphis, Tennessee, the kind of night where the wind cut through the walls like they were made of paper. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and the old apartment building on the corner of 3rd Street groaned under the weight of the cold, its pipes rattling, its windows shaking in their frames. On the 3rd floor, in apartment 3B, a young woman named Denise sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet. She was 28 years old. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She wore an oversized sweatshirt that used to belong to someone else, and a pair of sweatpants with a hole near the knee. Her feet were bare on the cold linoleum, and she could feel every crack in the floor beneath her. The heater had stopped working 3 days ago. She had called the landlord twice. He never called back, so Denise did what she always did. She layered blankets on the kids' stuffed old towels under the doors and kept the oven on low for a few hours in the evening just to take the edge off the cold. She knew it was dangerous. She did it anyway, because the cold was worse. Down the hallway, her 2 children were asleep. Jalen was 6, Amara was 3. They shared a small room with 1 mattress on the floor and a pile of blankets that Denise had collected from thrift stores over the years. Jalen always slept on the outside closest to the door. He said it was because he was the man of the house. He was 6 years old and already trying to protect his family. Before he fell asleep, Jalen had looked up at his mother with those big, serious eyes of his and asked a question that hit Denise like a punch to the chest. "Mama, are we going to eat tomorrow?" Denise smiled. She always smiled, even when it hurt, even when the smile was a lie. "Yes, baby. Mama's going to figure it out." Jalen nodded, satisfied. He trusted her. He always trusted her. And that trust was both the thing that kept Denise going and the thing that broke her heart the most, because she didn't know if she could keep that promise. After the kids were asleep, Denise walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. The light inside flickered, buzzing softly. The shelves were almost empty. There was a carton of milk with maybe 2 cups left. Half a loaf of bread that had gone stiff and dry. A single stick of butter. That was it. That was everything. She closed the door, slowly leaned against the counter, and let out a breath that came from somewhere deep and tired. Then she looked down at her left hand. The ring was still there. It had been there for 7 years. Silver-plated, not real gold, with a thin band that had turned slightly dark around the edges from years of wear. It wasn't worth much. She knew that. Any jeweler would take one look at it and shake their head. But to Denise, that ring was everything. It was the last piece of a life she used to have. The last proof that someone had once stood in front of her and said, "I choose you." She twisted the ring slowly around her finger, feeling the familiar groove it had pressed into her skin over the years. She thought about the day she got it. She thought about the smile on his face when he put it on her finger. She thought about how happy she was, how full of hope. And then she thought about her children sleeping in a cold room with empty stomachs, trusting her to figure it out. Denise closed her eyes. Her jaw tightened. She pulled the ring off her finger and held it in her palm. It was so small, so light, almost nothing. But it felt like she was holding her whole past in her hand. Tomorrow morning, she whispered to herself. First thing? She placed the ring on the kitchen counter right next to the empty fruit bowl and stared at it for a long time. The kitchen was quiet. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock on the wall and the faint breathing of her children from down the hall. She didn't know it yet, but that ring worth almost nothing to the world was about to start something extraordinary. The next morning, Denise woke up before the sun. She hadn't slept much. Her mind had been running all night, turning the same thought over and over like a stone in her hand. She got dressed quickly, pulled on her old winter coat, the one with the broken zipper that she held closed with a safety pin, and gently woke the kids. "Come on, babies. We're going out." Jalen rubbed his eyes. "Where are we going, Mama? Just a quick stop." "Then, we're getting breakfast." That word breakfast was enough to get them moving. They walked 4 blocks to the pawn shop on Lamar Avenue. It was a small, narrow store squeezed between a check-cashing place and a laundromat. The windows were thick with dust, and behind the glass old guitars, power tools, watches, and jewelry sat under yellow lights like forgotten things, waiting for someone to care about them again. The air inside smelled like metal and cleaning fluid, and something old that had been sitting still for too long. A man stood behind the counter. He was in his 60s with thin white hair and glasses that sat low on his nose. He didn't smile when Denise walked in. He didn't greet her. He just looked at her, then at the 2 small children holding onto her coat, and waited. Denise stepped up to the counter. Her heart was beating fast. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the ring, and set it gently on the glass counter. Her fingers lingered on it for just a second longer than they needed to. The man picked it up without a word. He held it up to the light, turned it over, looked at it through a small magnifying glass. Then he set it down. "Silver-plated," he said flatly. "I can give you $12. $12. 7 years of love. 7 years of hope. $12. Denise wanted to say no. She wanted to pick the ring back up, put it in her pocket, and walk out. But then she felt a small hand tugging at her coat. She looked down. Amara was looking up at her with wide, quiet eyes. She wasn't asking for anything. She was just holding on. And that was enough. Denise looked back at the man behind the counter. "Okay," she said. The man opened the register and counted out 12 $1 bills. He laid them on the glass counter one by one. Denise picked them up, folded them carefully, and put them in her pocket. She didn't look at the ring again. She couldn't. She took Amara's hand, put her other hand on Jalen's shoulder, and walked out of the store. The bell above the door chimed behind her. Outside, the cold air hit her face, and that's when the tears came. She turned her back to the children and wiped her eyes quickly with the sleeve of her coat. "Mama, why are you crying?" Jalen asked. "I'm not crying, baby," Denise said, sniffing. "It's just cold." They walked down the sidewalk toward the grocery store, and Denise didn't look back. But inside the pawn shop, someone had been watching. A man was standing in the far corner of the store, near a shelf of old radios and dusty record players. He had been there when Denise walked in. He had seen her set the ring on the counter. He had watched her face when the man said $12. He had seen the way her fingers held on to it just a moment too long, like she was saying goodbye to something she loved. And now he watched her walk out the door with her 2 children. He stood there for a moment. Then he walked to the counter. "I'll take that ring," he said. The man behind the counter looked at him. $12. The man reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled bill, and placed it on the counter. He picked up the ring and held it between his thumb and finger. He turned it slowly. Inside the band there was a small engraving. The letters were faint, almost worn away, but he could still read them. Forever D and T. He closed his fingers around the ring and put it in his jacket pocket. He didn't know why he had bought it. He only knew that watching that woman take it off her finger had made something inside him ache in a way he hadn't felt in years. He stepped outside into the cold morning air and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking down the street in the direction Denise had gone. She was already out of sight. He walked to the parking lot behind the store, climbed into an old Ford pickup truck with rust along the wheel wells, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. He pulled the ring out of his pocket and looked at it again. The silver caught the light, and the engraving seemed to glow for just a second. Then he put it back in his pocket, started the truck, and drove away. He would keep that ring in his jacket pocket for exactly 91 days, before he finally found the courage to do what his heart had been telling him to do since the moment he saw her. Now, to understand Denise's story, you need to go back. Back before the pawn shop. Back before the empty refrigerator and the broken heater. Back to the beginning. Denise grew up in South Memphis, in a neighborhood where the houses leaned to one side and the sidewalks were cracked like dry riverbeds. Her mother, Gloria, worked as a night shift nurse at a hospital across town. She left for work every evening at 6 and came home every morning at 7, tired to the bone, but always with a smile for her daughter. Denise's father left when she was 4. Just walked out one morning and never came back. No letter. No phone call. No explanation. Gloria never talked about him. She just kept working. She kept showing up. And she raised Denise the best way she knew how, alone. Denise was a quiet girl. She did well in school, kept to herself mostly, and spent her afternoons reading library books on the front porch while the neighborhood moved around her. She didn't have many friends. She didn't need many. She had her mother, and that was enough. Then, in her junior year of high school, she met Terrence. Terrence was the kind of boy who walked into a room and made everyone notice. He was tall, funny, loud, and full of energy. He talked fast, laughed hard, and had a way of looking at Denise that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. He asked her out on a Tuesday. She said yes on a Wednesday. And from that moment on, they were inseparable. They got married when Denise was 21. It was a small ceremony at the courthouse, just the two of them, and Gloria. Terrence couldn't afford a real ring. He bought one at a second-hand store for $15. It was silver-plated with a thin band that was a little too big for Denise's finger. "It's not much," Terrence said, sliding it on, "but one day I'll buy you a real one." Denise looked at the ring, then looked at him and smiled. "This is real," she said, and she meant it. In that moment, standing in the courthouse hallway with the fluorescent lights buzzing above them, she felt like the richest woman in the world. The first year was good. Not perfect, but good. They found a small apartment. Terrence got a job at a warehouse. Denise worked part-time at a grocery store. Then Jalen was born, and for a while, everything felt like it was falling into place. But things changed. The warehouse cut Terrence's hours. Then they let him go. He started drinking. Not a lot at first, a beer after dinner. Then 2. Then a 6-pack. Then he stopped coming home on time. He stopped playing with Jalen. He stopped looking at Denise the way he used to. Denise tried. She tried talking to him. She tried being patient. She tried praying. But Terrence was slipping away, and no matter how hard she reached, she couldn't hold on to him. When Denise found out she was pregnant with Amara, she thought maybe that would bring him back. Maybe a new baby would remind him of what they had, what they were building. But one night, when Denise was 7 months pregnant, Terrence didn't come home. She waited up for him until 2 in the morning, then 3, then 4. He never came. His clothes were gone. His phone was disconnected. He left behind a stack of unpaid bills, an empty bottle on the kitchen counter, and a silence so loud it filled every room in the apartment. He never called. He never wrote. He just disappeared like a hand pulled out of water, leaving nothing but ripples that faded to nothing. Denise had Amara alone. Gloria came to the hospital, held her hand, stayed for 3 days. But Gloria was getting older and her own health was failing. She couldn't carry both of them anymore. So Denise carried herself. She worked every job she could find. Cashier at Walmart, housekeeper at a motel off the interstate, delivery driver when she could borrow a friend's car. She never complained. She never stopped. But the math never worked. Rent, daycare, diapers, food, electricity. There was always more month than money. She never filed for divorce. She couldn't afford a lawyer. So technically, she was still married to a man who had vanished. Still wearing the ring he gave her. Still carrying the promise he broke. And then Walmart cut her hours. Then they let her go completely. Corporate restructuring, they called it. Just like that, her paycheck was gone. No savings, no family to call, no backup plan. The only thing she had left that could be turned into money was a $15 ring from a second-hand store. And now even that ring was gone. $12. That was what Denise had to work with. 12 single-dollar bills folded in her coat pocket. She walked straight from the pawn shop to the Save a Lot on the corner of Shelby Drive. She held Amara on one hip and Jalen's hand in the other, and she did the math in her head as she walked through the doors. A gallon of milk, $3.29. A loaf of white bread, $1.89. A jar of peanut butter, the store brand, the big one, $2.49. A pack of instant noodles, the kind with 6 pouches inside, $1.19. A small bag of rice, $2.10. She stood in the aisle and counted on her fingers. That left her with about $1 left over. She picked up a single banana and put it in Jalen's hand. "For you," she said. "Just one?" Jalen asked. "One's enough for today." At the register, the total came to $11.18. Denise paid with her folded bills and put the change 82 cents into her pocket. She carried the bags home with Amara on her hip and Jalen walking beside her, peeling the banana slowly, like it was something precious. That night, Denise made peanut butter sandwiches for dinner. She cut each one into 4 triangles because Jalen once said triangles tasted better than squares. She poured milk into 2 small cups. She gave the children their food and sat across from them at the kitchen table watching them eat. She didn't make a plate for herself. "Mama, aren't you eating?" Jalen asked. "I already ate, baby." While I was cooking. She hadn't. But the math was simple. If she skipped meals, the food would last 5 days instead of 3. 5 days was a long time. 5 days was enough time to find a job. 5 days was enough time for something to change. The next morning, Denise mixed the milk with a little water to stretch it further. She poured it into Jalen's cereal bowl, the rice puffs she found at the back of the cabinet, the last handful from a box she bought weeks ago. Jalen took a sip and made a face. "This milk tastes funny, Mama." Denise didn't miss a beat. "It's a new brand, baby. They were out of the regular one." Jalen shrugged and kept eating. Denise turned away so he wouldn't see her face. The days blurred together after that. Monday, she walked to a Burger King on Elvis Presley Boulevard and asked if they were hiring. The manager said to fill out an application online. Denise didn't have a computer. She walked to the public library, waited 40 minutes for an open terminal, and filled out the form. She listed every job she'd ever had. She checked available immediately. She clicked submit. She applied at a Dollar General, a gas station, a car wash. She filled out form after form, writing the same information over and over again. Name, address, work history, references. She didn't have many references. She put down Gloria's number, even though Gloria had been in the hospital for 3 months and couldn't answer her phone most days. She waited. She checked her phone every hour, making sure the ringer was on, making sure she hadn't missed a call. No one called. She applied again. A different Dollar General. A different gas station. A cleaning company that needed overnight workers. She left her number everywhere. She smiled at every manager, shook every hand, said thank you for your time like she meant it. Still nothing. By Wednesday, the peanut butter was half gone. The bread was down to 4 slices. The rice was getting low. Denise did the math again in her head and felt her chest tighten. Every evening after the children were asleep, Denise sat by the window in the kitchen and looked out at the street below. The streetlight outside their building flickered on and off, casting long orange shadows across the pavement. She could hear music coming from somewhere down the block. A dog barking, a car door slamming. She looked down at her left hand. The ring was gone, but the mark was still there. A thin, pale line pressed into her skin where the band had been for 7 years. She touched it with her thumb, tracing the groove like reading a scar. "God," she whispered so quietly that even the walls couldn't hear her. "I don't know how much longer I can do this." She sat there for a long time. The street light flickered. The music faded. The street went quiet. By Friday, the food was gone. All of it. The milk carton was empty. The bread bag had nothing but crumbs. The peanut butter jar had been scraped clean with a spoon. Denise stood in front of the open refrigerator and stared at the empty shelves. The light buzzed. The cold air drifted out and touched her face. This was the second time she had stood in front of this refrigerator with nothing inside, but the first time she had a ring to sell. This time she had nothing. No ring, no savings, no paycheck coming. Nothing but 82 cents in her coat pocket and 2 children who would wake up in a few hours hungry. Denise closed the refrigerator door and pressed her forehead against it. The metal was cold against her skin. She closed her eyes and stood there breathing slowly, holding on to the only thing she had left, herself. The next Monday morning, Denise got dressed in her cleanest clothes, the ones she had washed by hand in the bathtub 2 days ago and hung to dry on the shower rod. She pulled her hair back, put on her only pair of shoes that didn't have holes in them, and walked to a diner called Patty's Place on Poplar Avenue. They had a sign in the window that said, "Now hiring." She walked in, asked to speak to the manager, and waited by the counter for 15 minutes. A woman in her 40s came out from the back. She had a clipboard in one hand and a tired expression on her face. "You're here about the job, yes ma'am." The manager looked her up and down. "You got experience." "Yes ma'am. I worked at Walmart for 2 years. Before that I was a housekeeper at the Route 78 motel." The manager nodded. "We need someone for evenings and weekends, 4 to close." "Can you do that?" Denise's heart sank. 4 to close. That meant she'd need someone to watch Jalen and Amara every evening. Daycare closed at 6. She didn't have family nearby. She didn't have money for a babysitter. I'm working on childcare," Denise said carefully. "I just need a little time to set it up." The manager shook her head. "We need someone who can start this week. Reliable schedule. No maybes." "I understand, but if you could just give me a few days too." "I'll keep your name on file," the manager said. It was the kind of thing people said when they meant no. "We'll let you know." They never called. 2 days later, Denise walked into a convenience store on Park Avenue. The man behind the counter looked at her application and frowned. "It says here you haven't worked in 2 months. I was laid off, but I'm ready to work right now. We're looking for someone with a more consistent work history. No gaps." Denise wanted to say that the gap wasn't her fault, that she had been working every day of her life since she was 16, that the only reason she stopped was because a corporation decided she was a number on a spreadsheet, but she didn't say any of that. She just nodded and said, "Thank you for your time." She tried a delivery service next. The woman on the phone asked, "Do you have a reliable vehicle?" "No, ma'am, but I can." "You need a car for this position." "Sorry." The phone went dead. Each time Denise walked through the apartment door after another rejection, she put on the same face, the same smile, the same steady voice. "Did you find a job?" Mama Jalen asked. He asked every single day. He asked it the way other kids ask if it's going to snow. Full of hope. "Almost," baby Denise said. "Almost." She said it so many times that the word started to lose its meaning. Almost, almost, almost. A word that sounds like progress, but feels like standing still. One afternoon after her 3rd rejection that week, Denise sat down on a bench at the bus stop on Lamar Avenue. She was supposed to ride the bus to another interview, but she couldn't move. Her body was heavy. Her legs felt like they were made of concrete. She put her hands over her face and just sat there, bent forward, breathing into her palms. She didn't cry. She was too tired to cry. Crying takes energy, and Denise didn't have any left. A few minutes later, she felt someone sit down next to her. She didn't look up. "You okay, honey?" a voice asked. It was soft and old and warm like a blanket that had been in the sun. Denise lifted her head slowly. An elderly woman sat beside her, small and thin, with silver hair tucked under a knit hat. She had a brown paper bag on her lap and kind, steady eyes that looked at Denise without judgment. "Yes, ma'am," Denise said, forcing a small smile. "Just tired." The old woman looked at her for a long moment. A long, quiet moment. Then she nodded. "Tired is just another word for strong, baby. Don't you forget that." The bus pulled up. The old woman stood, patted Denise gently on the shoulder, and climbed aboard. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. And just like that, she was gone. Denise sat on that bench for another 10 minutes. She didn't know the woman's name. She would never see her again. But those words, that single sentence from a stranger on a bus bench, landed somewhere deep inside her chest and stayed there, like a small flame in a cold room. She stood up, straightened her coat, and kept walking. 3 days later, on a Thursday morning, Denise was walking down Summer Avenue with Jalen and Amara. She wasn't going anywhere in particular. She had run out of places to apply. She was just walking because walking felt better than sitting in that empty apartment staring at the walls. Then she saw it. A small, handwritten sign taped to the window of a laundromat. The letters were written in blue marker on a piece of white cardboard. Help wanted. Part-time. Flexible hours. Denise stopped walking. She read the sign again. Part-time. Flexible hours. She looked through the window. Inside, rows of washing machines and dryers hummed softly. An older woman stood behind a folding table sorting clothes with quick, practiced hands. Denise pushed the door open and stepped inside. The warm air hit her face, immediately thick with the smell of detergent and fabric softener. It smelled clean. It smelled safe. The woman behind the table looked up. She was in her mid-60s, with reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, and gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had strong hands and a face that looked like it had seen a lot of life, but hadn't let it make her hard. "Can I help you?" the woman asked. "I saw your sign," Denise said, in the window. "The help wanted sign." The woman set down the shirt she was folding and looked at Denise. Then she looked at Jalen, who was holding his mother's hand. Then at Amara, who was resting her head on Denise's shoulder, half asleep. "I'm Lorraine," the woman said. "This is my place. Been running it for 20 years. I'm Denise. These are my kids, Jalen and Amara." Lorraine nodded slowly. "You got experience. I can clean. I can fold. I can talk to people. I'll do whatever you need." "You got kids," Lorraine said. It wasn't a question. She was looking at them again, at the way Jalen stood close to his mother, at the way Amara's tiny hand gripped the collar of Denise's coat. Denise braced herself. Here it comes, she thought. The question about childcare. The question about availability. The question that always led to the same answer. No. But Lorraine didn't ask that question. Instead, she tilted her head slightly and said, "What hours work best for you?" Denise blinked. No one had ever asked her that before. Every job she'd applied for told her what hours they needed. No one had ever asked what hours she needed. "Mornings," Denise said. "While Jalen's in school. I can bring Amara with me if that's okay." Lorraine looked at Amara, who had opened her eyes and was staring at the spinning dryers with wide, curious eyes. "She quiet," very Denise said. "Then she's welcome." Lorraine offered Denise $9 an hour, 25 hours a week. It was part-time. It was barely above minimum wage. It wasn't going to make Denise rich or even comfortable, but it was something. It was a paycheck. It was a start. "I know it's not much," Lorraine said, as if reading Denise's mind. "This ain't a fancy job, but it's honest work. And honest work has a way of opening doors you didn't know existed." Denise started the next morning. She arrived before the laundromat opened, swept the floors, wiped down the machines, and folded the clothes that customers left in the dryers overnight. Jalen sat in the corner near the window with his backpack doing his homework on a small plastic chair. Amara sat on a blanket Lorraine had pulled from somewhere, surrounded by a pile of clean socks she was trying to match. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't glamorous. But for the first time in weeks, Denise felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Useful. Now, before we continue Denise's story, I want you to understand something important. Because what Denise went through is not just a story. It's a reality that millions of women in this country face every single day. In the United States, nearly 30% of single mother families live below the poverty line. That's almost 1 in 3. And poverty for a single mother doesn't just mean not having enough money. It means choosing between rent and food. It means skipping your own meals so your children can eat. It means walking past a help wanted sign and knowing that even if you got the job, you still couldn't afford someone to watch your kids while you worked. The average cost of childcare in America is more than $10,000 a year. For a single mother earning minimum wage, that's nearly half her entire income before taxes. Think about that. Half of everything she earns just to have someone watch her children while she works to earn that money. It's a cycle that doesn't have an easy exit. And here's something most people don't talk about. Employers look at a gap on your resume and see a risk. They don't see the woman who spent those months changing diapers, cooking meals, reading bedtime stories, holding a household together with nothing but willpower and love. They see a blank space, and that blank space costs women jobs every single day. Nearly 14 million children in the United States live in food-insecure households. That means tonight, right now, as you're watching this, there are children going to bed hungry. Not in some far-off country. Right here, in Memphis, in Detroit, in Houston, in your city, maybe even on your street. Denise's story is fictional, but the struggle she represents is not. The numbers are real. The hunger is real. The barriers are real. The women standing in front of empty refrigerators at midnight, trying to figure out how to feed their children tomorrow, they are very, very real. And that's why this story matters. Not because it's dramatic, not because it's entertaining, but because somewhere right now, there is a woman just like Denise, holding her children close, wondering if anyone sees her. Now, let's get back to the story. Because, while Denise was learning to fold laundry and rebuild her life one small step at a time, there was someone else in Memphis who had been carrying something with him for weeks. Something small, something silver, something that weighed almost nothing in his pocket, but everything in his heart. Marcus. Remember him? The man from the pawn shop. The one who bought Denise's ring for $12 and walked out without a word. We need to go back to him now. Because, to understand what happens next, you need to understand who Marcus is and why that ring mattered to him. Marcus was 33 years old. He worked as an electrician for a small company called Delta Electrical Services on the east side of Memphis. He wasn't the boss. He wasn't management. He was just a guy who showed up every morning at 7, put on his work belt, and spent his days running wire through walls and fixing circuits in old buildings. His hands were rough and calloused, the kind of hands that told you everything you needed to know about how he made his living. He rented a 1-bedroom apartment off Getwell Road. He drove a pickup truck with 160,000 miles on it. He ate most of his meals alone. He didn't have a wife. He didn't have kids. He didn't have much of anybody, really. He had a few friends from work, a cousin in Atlanta he called on holidays, and a neighbor who sometimes waved at him from across the parking lot. Marcus lived a quiet life. Not because he wanted to, but because quiet was all he knew. He grew up in foster care. He'd been in the system since he was 9 years old. Before that, he lived with his mother, a woman named Charlene, in a small apartment on the south side of the city. Charlene worked 2 jobs. She cleaned offices in the morning and waited tables at a diner in the evening. She was always tired, always moving, always running from one place to the next. But she loved Marcus with everything she had. Charlene was a single mother. Marcus never knew his father. He never asked about him, and Charlene never brought him up. It was just the 2 of them, and for a while that was enough. But Charlene was sick. She had been sick for a long time. She had headaches that wouldn't go away. She lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. She coughed at night, deep, rattling coughs that shook the walls. Marcus would lie in bed and listen, pulling the blanket up to his chin, counting the seconds between each cough, hoping the next one wouldn't come. She didn't have health insurance. She couldn't afford to see a doctor, so she didn't. She just kept working. She just kept going, until one day she couldn't go anymore. Marcus was 9 when they took his mother to the hospital. He remembers sitting in the waiting room, swinging his legs because his feet couldn't reach the floor. A nurse came out and told him he could see her. He walked into the room and saw his mother lying in a bed that seemed too big for her. She was thin. Her skin was gray. Her eyes were half closed. But when she saw him, she smiled. "Come here, baby," she said. Marcus climbed up onto the bed and sat beside her. She reached under her pillow and pulled out something small and silver, a ring, her wedding ring. The only piece of jewelry she owned. "Keep this," she said, pressing it into his palm. Her hand was cold. Her fingers were thin and shaking. It's the only thing I have that means anything." Marcus held the ring and looked at it. It was simple, small, silver, just like Denise's ring, just like the one he would buy from a pawn shop 24 years later. "Mama, you're gonna be okay, right?" Marcus asked. Charlene smiled again. But this time the smile didn't reach her eyes. "I love you, baby. More than anything in this whole world. Don't you ever forget that." She died 3 days later. Marcus went into foster care. He moved from home to home, family to family. Some were kind, some were not. But through all of it, through every new school, and every new bedroom, and every new set of rules, Marcus kept that ring. He kept it in his pocket during the day, and under his pillow at night. It was the only thing he had left of her. He kept it for 24 years. Through high school, through trade school, through his first job, his first apartment, his first heartbreak. That ring went everywhere with him. It was his anchor, his proof that he had been loved once, that he mattered to someone. And then 6 months before he walked into that pawn shop on Lamar Avenue, someone broke into his truck while it was parked outside a job site. They took his tools, they took his radio, and they took the small leather pouch he kept in the glove compartment, the pouch that held his mother's ring. Marcus filed a police report. He drove to every pawn shop in Memphis describing the ring, hoping someone had brought it in. No one had. The ring was gone, just like that. 24 years of carrying it, and it vanished in an afternoon. He stopped looking after a month. He told himself it was just a ring, just metal, that the memory of his mother lived in him, not in some piece of jewelry. But late at night, when the apartment was dark and quiet, he'd reach for his pocket and feel the emptiness there, and something inside him would break all over again. That's why he was in the pawn shop that morning. He wasn't there to buy anything. He went in the way a person visits a graveyard, not to find what they lost, but to be near the kind of place where lost things end up. And then he saw Denise. He saw her walk up to the counter with 2 small children. He saw her pull a ring off her finger. He saw the way her hand trembled. He saw the man behind the counter say $12 without even blinking. He saw Denise swallow hard, look down at the little girl holding her leg and say, "Okay." And in that moment, Marcus didn't see a stranger. He saw his mother. The same trembling hands, the same quiet courage, the same refusal to cry in front of her children, the same impossible choice between holding on to something precious and keeping her family alive. He bought the ring before he even knew what he was doing. $12. He put it in his jacket pocket and walked outside. Denise was already gone. He looked up and down the street, but she had disappeared into the cold morning air with her children, and he had no idea who she was or where she lived. Over the next few weeks, Marcus went back to that pawn shop twice. He asked the owner if the woman had come back. The owner shrugged and said he didn't keep track of customers. Marcus drove through the neighborhoods nearby, not sure what he was looking for. A woman in an old coat with 2 small kids. That was all he had to go on. He didn't find her. But he kept the ring. He carried it in his pocket every single day, right where his mother's ring used to be. And every night he would take it out, read the engraving inside the band Forever D and T, and wonder about the woman who had worn it. He wondered if she was okay. He wondered if her children had eaten. He wondered if she was out there somewhere missing this ring the way he missed his. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But he knew one thing. He was going to find her. And he was going to give it back. 6 weeks. That's how long the good stretch lasted. 6 weeks of waking up early, walking to the laundromat, folding clothes, wiping machines, earning $9 an hour, and feeling like maybe, just maybe, things were turning around. Denise paid a portion of her back rent. Not all of it, but enough to keep the landlord from knocking. She bought groceries with a plan, now stretching every dollar like fabric on a loom. Rice, beans, eggs, bread, the basics. Nothing fancy. But the refrigerator was no longer empty, and that alone felt like a victory. Jalen was smiling more. He liked the laundromat. He liked sitting in the corner doing his homework while the machines hummed around him. He liked Lorraine, who always saved him a peppermint from the jar she kept behind the counter. Amara had her own little spot on the blanket near the dryers, and sometimes she fell asleep there warm and safe, wrapped in the sound of spinning clothes. For 6 weeks, Denise felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Steady ground beneath her feet. Then, on a Tuesday night, Jalen started coughing. At first, Denise thought it was just a cold. She gave him warm water with honey and tucked him in with an extra blanket. But by Wednesday morning, the cough was worse. Deep, wet. The kind of cough that comes from somewhere in the chest and doesn't let go. Jalen's forehead was hot to the touch. His eyes were glassy. He didn't want to eat. By Wednesday night, his fever hit 103. Denise didn't have a car. She didn't have money for a cab. She wrapped Jalen in a blanket, put Amara on her hip, and walked 6 blocks to the bus stop in the cold. They rode the bus to Regional 1 Medical Center. The emergency room was bright, loud, and full of people waiting on plastic chairs, coughing, crying, holding ice packs, staring at their phones. Denise held Jalen in her lap and waited. They waited for 2 hours. When a doctor finally saw him, she listened to his chest with a stethoscope, ordered a chest x-ray, and came back with a face that Denise recognized. It was the face of someone delivering bad news gently. "Your son has pneumonia," the doctor said. "We need to start him on antibiotics right away. He'll need to be monitored for 3 to 5 days. Denise nodded. She would have agreed to anything. She would have agreed to fly to the moon if it meant her son would be okay. Then the woman from billing came. She was polite. She smiled. She held a clipboard. "Ma'am, do you have insurance?" "No," Denise said. The woman nodded and wrote something down. The estimated cost for the ER visit, the X-ray, antibiotics, and the monitoring period is approximately $2,800. $2,800. The number landed on Denise like a concrete block dropped from a rooftop. She didn't have $2,800. She didn't have $280. She had $73 in her checking account and a jar of coins on her kitchen counter. "We can set up a payment plan," the woman said. "But we'll need a signature." Denise signed. What else could she do? That night, Jalen lay in a hospital bed that was too big for him, connected to an IV and a beeping monitor. His face was pale, his breathing was shallow but steady. The antibiotics were working, the nurse said. He just needed time. Denise sat beside him in a plastic chair, the kind of chair that was designed to be cleaned, not to be comfortable. Her back ached, her eyes burned. She held Jalen's hand, his small, hot fingers wrapped around hers, and she listened to the rhythm of the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. She thought about everything she had done. She had sold her ring. She had found a job. She had clawed her way back from nothing. She had done everything right. And now here she was sitting in a hospital holding her sick child's hand, drowning in a bill she could never pay. It felt like climbing a mountain with no top. Every time she thought she was getting somewhere, the ground shifted, and she slid back down. She closed her eyes and whispered into the quiet room. "Please let him be okay. That's all I'm asking. Just let my boy be okay." Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. It was Lorraine. "Hey, baby. I heard about Jalen. Don't you worry about the shop, you hear me. Your boy comes first. You still have a job when you get back. Take all the time you need." Denise read the message 3 times. Then she held the phone against her chest and breathed. She wasn't alone. Not completely. Not anymore. 3 days later, Jalen was better. The color had returned to his face. He was eating again small bites of hospital jello and crackers that he said tasted like paper. He was complaining, which Denise took as a good sign. Sick children don't complain. Children who are getting better do. The doctor said he could go home but needed to finish his antibiotics. She handed Denise a prescription and a discharge form. Then the billing office sent over the final number, $3,200. It was higher than the estimate. There had been an additional test, an extra night. Denise looked at the number on the paper and felt the floor tilt beneath her. She signed the payment agreement, $50 a month. It would take her over 5 years to pay it off. 5 years of $50 money she didn't have pulled from a paycheck that barely covered rent and food. They took the bus home. Jalen leaned against her shoulder, still weak. Amara sat on her other side quiet, holding a stuffed bear that one of the nurses had given her. When they got to the apartment building and climbed the stairs to the third floor, Denise saw it immediately. A yellow paper taped to the door. She didn't need to read it up close. She knew what it was. She had seen them before on other people's doors, in other buildings, in other lifetimes. But this time, it was on her door. Late rent notice. You have 14 days to pay the full balance or vacate the premises. Denise pulled the paper off the door, folded it, and put it in her pocket. She unlocked the door, carried Amara inside, helped Jalen to his bed, and tucked them both in. She made sure they were warm. She made sure they were safe. She kissed them both on the forehead and closed their bedroom door softly. Then she walked into the kitchen, sat down on the floor in the dark, and cried. Not the quiet kind. Not the kind where you wipe your eyes and keep going. This was the other kind. The kind that comes up from somewhere so deep you didn't even know it was there. The kind that shakes your whole body and makes your chest feel like it's being torn open from the inside. She pressed a pillow against her face so the children wouldn't hear. She bit her lip until she tasted something metallic, and she cried. I sold my ring. I found a job. I did everything right. Why is it still not enough? She rocked back and forth on the kitchen floor, her arms wrapped around the pillow, her tears soaking into the fabric. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? The question echoed in her mind like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. She didn't have an answer. She had nothing left to sell, nowhere left to cut, no one left to call. Then she heard it. A small cough from the bedroom, and then a voice, thin and tired. Mama Denise wiped her face with both hands. She took a breath, then another. She stood up, walked to the bedroom, and opened the door. Jalen was sitting up in bed, his eyes half open, his hair messy against the pillow. Can I have some water? He whispered. Of course, baby. She went to the kitchen, poured a cup of water, and brought it back to him. He drank slowly, then looked up at her with those big, serious eyes of his. Mama, yes, baby, you're the best mama in the whole world. Denise felt something crack inside her chest. Not break. Crack. Like light finding its way through a wall. She smiled. A real smile. The first one in days. And you're the best boy in the whole world, she said. She lay down beside him on the small mattress. He curled into her side, his head resting against her arm. Amara was already asleep on the other side, her tiny hand gripping the stuffed bear. Denise pulled the blanket over all three of them and closed her eyes. She didn't have answers. She didn't have a plan. But she had this room, these children, this warmth. She held onto it the way a person holds onto a rope in the dark. Not because they can see where it leads, but because letting go is not an option. She didn't know that in just 11 days a stranger with a $12 ring in his pocket would walk through the door of the laundromat, and everything would begin to change. It was a Thursday afternoon when it happened. The kind of ordinary, unremarkable Thursday that you forget about the moment it passes. The sky was gray. A light rain had fallen that morning and left the streets wet and shining. The laundromat on Summer Avenue hummed with its usual rhythm washers, spinning dryers tumbling, the smell of warm detergent drifting through the air. Denise was behind the counter folding a stack of white towels. Amara was asleep on the blanket near the dryers. Lorraine had stepped out to pick up supplies from the hardware store down the street. It was just Denise and a few customers sitting in the plastic chairs watching their clothes go round and round. The door opened. A bell chimed. Denise looked up. A man walked in. He was in his early 30s wearing work boots, a pair of jeans with faint stains on the knees, and a dark jacket with a frayed collar. His hands were rough, the hands of someone who worked with them every day. He stood just inside the door and looked around the laundromat like he was searching for something. Then his eyes landed on Denise. He froze. Denise didn't recognize him. She had never seen his face before. She had no reason to. The last time they had been in the same room, she had been crying at a pawn shop counter, and he had been standing in a corner watching. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked politely. The man didn't answer right away. He just stood there looking at her, his jaw tight, his eyes moving across her face like he was confirming something he already knew. Then he walked forward. Slowly, one step at a time, he reached the counter and stopped. He was close enough now that Denise could see the small scar above his left eyebrow and the way his hands were trembling just slightly. Without saying a word, he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled something out. Something small, something silver. He placed it on the counter gently, carefully, the way you set down something fragile. Denise looked down. Her heart stopped. It was a ring. A thin silver band, slightly darkened at the edges. She knew that ring. She knew the weight of it. She knew the way it felt on her finger. She knew every scratch, every curve, every faded millimeter of it. She reached out and picked it up with shaking hands. She turned it slowly and looked inside the band. The engraving was still there. Faint, almost worn away, but still there. Forever D and T. Her throat closed, her vision blurred. She looked up at the man, and her voice came out in a whisper. Where did you get this?" "I was in the pawn shop that day," he said. His voice was quiet but steady. "I saw you take it off." Denise's breath caught. "You bought my ring." "Yes. Why?" The man was silent for a moment. He looked at the ring in her hands, then back at her face, and when he spoke, his voice was thick, like the words had been sitting inside him for a long time, waiting to come out. "Because my mother was a single mom too, and the only thing she ever gave me was her wedding ring. I know what it means to carry something like that." He paused. "And I know what it costs to let it go." Denise couldn't hold it. The tears came fast and hard, falling onto the counter, onto the ring, onto her hands. She wasn't crying because of the ring. She was crying because for the first time since Terrence walked out that door, someone had seen her. Not looked at her. Not glanced past her. Seen her. Really, truly seen her. The man reached into his pocket and took out nothing else. He didn't pull out a checkbook. He didn't offer cash. He just stood there calm and still while she cried. "I don't want anything from you," he said softly. "I just want to give this back. It belongs with you." Denise pressed the ring against her chest and looked at him through her tears. "What's your name?" she asked. "Marcus," he said. "Marcus," she repeated. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thank you. I don't even know what to say. Thank you." Marcus nodded. He started to turn toward the door. "Wait," Denise said. "Please, don't go yet. At least let me know. Why? Why did you keep it all this time? Why did you come looking for me?" Marcus stopped. He turned back around. He looked at Denise for a long moment, like he was deciding how much to say. Then he pulled out one of the plastic chairs from the folding table and sat down. "I didn't come looking for you," he said. "I came here to do laundry. I live about a mile from here. I've driven past this place 100 times but never stopped." He looked around the laundromat. "I almost didn't stop today either, but something told me to." Denise sat down across from him, still holding the ring. "I've been carrying that ring in my pocket every day for 3 months, Marcus said. "I went back to the pawn shop twice asking about you. The old man behind the counter didn't know your name. I drove around the neighborhood, hoping I'd see you. I never did. And then today, I walked in here, and there you were." They sat in silence for a moment. The washers hummed, the dryers spun. Amara stirred on her blanket but didn't wake. Then Denise did something she hadn't done with anyone in a very long time. She told him her story. All of it. The marriage, Terrence leaving, the jobs she lost. The night she sat on the kitchen floor and decided to sell the ring, the $12. The food that lasted 5 days. The job rejections, Klaus, the laundromat, Jalen's pneumonia, the hospital bill, the rent notice on the door. She told him everything because something about the way he sat there quiet and still made her feel like it was safe to. Marcus listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't shake his head or offer pity. He just listened with his hands folded on the table, his eyes steady, his face calm. When she finished, there was a long pause. Then Marcus spoke. "I'm not rich, Denise. I'm an electrician. I make enough to keep a roof over my head and food on my table. That's about it." He paused. "But I know a few things that might help." Denise looked at him, not understanding. "The hospital bill," Marcus said. "Most hospitals in Memphis have a charity care program. If your income is below a certain level, they can reduce the bill by 70, sometimes 80%. You just have to fill out a form and bring proof of income. Most people don't know about it. I only know because a buddy of mine went through the same thing last year." Denise blinked. "They can reduce it." "Yes. And there's something else. There's an organization on Poplar Avenue called Memphis Family Assistance. They do emergency rental help. If you're behind on rent and you can show a pay stub, they can cover up to 3 months. I know, because they helped my neighbor last winter." Denise stared at him. Nobody had ever told her any of this. Not the hospital, not the landlord, not anyone. "And one more thing," Marcus said. He leaned forward. "There's a program at Southwest Tennessee Community College. It's free for qualifying women. They teach trades, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, 6-month certificate. And when you finish, they help you find a job. The starting pay is around $22 an hour." He said it simply, like he was giving directions to a grocery store. No drama, no grand gesture, just information. Denise looked at him. "Why are you telling me all this?" Marcus shrugged. "Because someone told me once that the hardest part of being broke isn't the money. It's not knowing what doors are out there. You can't walk through a door you don't even know exists." The front door of the laundromat opened. Lorraine walked in carrying a bag of cleaning supplies. She stopped when she saw Denise sitting at the table with a stranger. Tears still drying on her cheeks, a silver ring clutched in her hand. Lorraine looked at Marcus, then at Denise, then back at Marcus. "Everything all right?" Lorraine asked. Denise smiled. A real, genuine, full smile. The kind that reaches the eyes. "Yes, Miss Lorraine," she said. "I think it is." Lorraine set the bag down, walked to the little cooler behind the counter, and pulled out 2 bottles of water. She brought them to the table and set one in front of Denise and one in front of Marcus. "Well then," Lorraine said, patting Denise on the shoulder, "I'll be in the back if you need me." She walked away without another word. But as she turned the corner, Denise saw something she would never forget. Lorraine was smiling. A small, quiet, knowing smile. The kind of smile that says, "I've been waiting for this." Marcus and Denise sat in that laundromat for another hour. He helped her write down the names, addresses, and phone numbers of every resource he could think of. He told her which forms to fill out first. He told her what documents to bring. He didn't offer to pay her rent. He didn't offer to cover the hospital bill. He didn't pull out his wallet once. He gave her something more valuable than money. He gave her a map. And for the first time in a very, very long time, Denise looked at the road ahead and didn't see a dead end. She saw doors. Now, before we go on, I want to pause here for just a moment. Because what Marcus did in that laundromat, it wasn't magic. It wasn't a movie moment. But it was something that science actually has a name for. Psychologists call it elevation. It's that warm, spreading feeling you get in your chest when you see someone do something genuinely kind. Not kind for a camera. Not kind for a reward. Just kind because they chose to be. Researchers have found that when people experience elevation, something interesting happens. They don't just feel good. They actually become more likely to help someone else. Kindness, it turns out, is contagious. Not in a poetic way. In a real, measurable, scientific way. Think about the chain in this story. A woman named Charlene, dying in a hospital bed, gave her son a ring and said, "Keep this. It's the only thing I have that means anything." That act of love lived inside Marcus for 24 years. It shaped who he became. And when he saw a stranger in a pawn shop giving up the same kind of ring for the same kind of reason, something in him moved. He didn't think about it. He just acted. And then Marcus carried that ring for 91 days. He didn't throw it away. He didn't sell it. He kept it. He looked for her. And when he found her, he didn't try to be a hero. He just gave it back. And then he sat down and shared the one thing that cost him nothing but mattered more than money. Information. Direction. A map to doors she didn't know existed. Charlene's love created Marcus's compassion. Marcus's compassion became Denise's turning point. And Denise, well, we'll see what she does with it. That's how kindness works. It doesn't stay where you put it. It moves. It travels from person to person, hand to hand, heart to heart, sometimes across years, sometimes across generations. You might never see the end of the chain you start, but it keeps going. Marcus didn't save Denise with money. He saved her by seeing her, truly seeing her, and showing her that she wasn't invisible. And sometimes that's all any of us really need. Not a check, not a grand gesture. Just someone who looks at us and says, I see you, and you matter. Now let's get back to the story. Because 6 months had passed since that Thursday afternoon in the laundromat, and Denise's life looked nothing like it used to. She was still working at the laundromat. But things were different now. Lorraine had made her full-time, 40 hours a week, with a small raise. And more than that, Lorraine had started teaching Denise how to run the place, how to do the books, how to order supplies, how to handle the repair guys when the machines broke down. Lorraine said she wasn't getting any younger, and she needed someone she could trust to keep things going when she couldn't. You're smart, Denise, Lorraine told her one afternoon. Smarter than you think. I didn't just give you a job, I gave you a future. Now do something with it. And Denise did. She enrolled in the Workforce Development Program at Southwest Tennessee Community College, the one Marcus had told her about. 3 evenings a week, she went to class and studied for her HVAC certificate. Heating, ventilation, air conditioning. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what she had imagined for herself when she was 18. But Marcus had told her something that stuck. Trades pay well, he said, and they always need people. Nobody's outsourcing a broken air conditioner. She studied hard. She studied the way someone studies when they know this is it, when there's no safety net and no second chance. She read the manuals at the kitchen table after the kids were asleep. She practiced wiring diagrams on scrap paper during her lunch breaks at the laundromat. She asked questions in class even when she felt stupid, because feeling stupid for 5 minutes was better than staying lost for a lifetime. The hospital bill, that number that had once felt like a wall with no door. Denise applied for the charity care program Marcus had told her about. She brought her pay stubs, her tax documents, everything they asked for. 2 weeks later, she got a letter in the mail. The bill had been reduced by 80%. $3,200 became $640. She set up a payment plan. $50 a month. It wasn't nothing, but it was possible. The rent. Memphis Family Assistance covered 3 months. 3 months of breathing room. 3 months of not lying awake at night doing math in her head trying to figure out which bill to skip. Denise used that time to catch up to build a small cushion to stop living on the edge of a cliff. Jalen was healthy again. He went to school every day with his backpack and his serious little face. He made a friend named Deshawn who lived 2 floors down. They walked to school together in the mornings, and Jalen always waved at Denise from the sidewalk before disappearing around the corner. Amara started preschool, a Head Start program free just 10 minutes from the apartment. She came home every day with paint on her fingers and new words in her mouth. Mama, I painted a butterfly today. Mama, I learned about the letter J. J for Jalen and Marcus. Marcus didn't sweep in like a knight. He didn't declare his love or make grand promises. He just kept showing up. Every Thursday, he came to the laundromat. Sometimes to do laundry. Sometimes just to talk. He and Denise would sit at the folding table while the machines hummed, drinking water from the cooler, talking about nothing and everything. He fixed the leaky faucet in her kitchen one Saturday without being asked. He built a small bookshelf for Jalen's room out of scrap wood from a job site. He brought Amara a coloring book he found at a gas station. Small things. Quiet things. The kind of things that don't make headlines, but build something solid underneath. Denise didn't fall in love with Marcus in a single moment. There was no thunderbolt, no dramatic confession in the rain. It was slower than that. Warmer. It was the way he listened when she talked, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak. It was the way he treated Jalen and Amara, not like someone else's children, but like small people who mattered. It was the way he never once made her feel like she owed him anything. It grew the way grass grows. You don't see it happening. Then one day you look down and it's there. One evening after the kids were asleep, Denise sat on her bed and looked at the ring. She had been wearing it again on her left hand, in the same spot where it had lived for 7 years. She turned it slowly, feeling the familiar groove against her skin. She slipped it off and held it up to the light. The engraving was still there. Forever D and T. She read the words and waited for the pain. But it didn't come. Not this time. She smiled a small, quiet smile and placed the ring carefully into a little wooden box on her nightstand. She closed the lid gently. It wasn't goodbye. It was thank you. Thank you for what it had been. Thank you for what it had cost her. And thank you for what it had started. The ring wasn't a wound anymore. It was a mile marker, proof of how far she had come. 2 years later, Denise walked across a small stage in a rented conference room at Southwest Tennessee Community College and received her HVAC certification. It wasn't a grand graduation. There was no gown, no cap, no marching band. Just a room full of folding chairs, a table with certificates laid out in a row, and a handful of instructors clapping as each student's name was called. But when they called her name, Denise stood up and the room got a little bit louder, because Lorraine was there in the third row clapping hard enough for 10 people. And Marcus was there standing near the back, smiling that quiet, steady smile of his. And Jalen was there sitting on his chair, with his feet dangling off the ground, yelling, "That's my mama." Denise took her certificate in both hands and held it against her chest. It was just a piece of paper, but it felt heavier than that. It felt like every sleepless night, every empty refrigerator, every rejection, every tear she cried on a kitchen floor in the dark. All of it, compressed into one piece of paper that said, "You made it." She went to work for Delta Electrical and Mechanical Services, the same company where Marcus worked. It was a small outfit, 8 employees operating out of a warehouse on the east side of Memphis. Denise started at $22 an hour. Not a fortune, but more than double what she made at the laundromat. Enough to pay rent on time, enough to buy groceries without counting every dollar, enough to take Jalen and Amara to get ice cream on a Friday afternoon without checking her account first. She moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on a quiet street near Jalen's school. It was small and simple, but it had something the old apartment never had: a bedroom for each of the kids. The night they moved in, Jalen stood in the doorway of his new room, looked around and said, "This is really mine. All yours, baby," Denise said. He sat on the bed and bounced once. Then he looked up at her with a grin that lit up his whole face. "Mama, this is the best day of my life." Amara started kindergarten that fall. She wore a backpack almost as big as she was and insisted on picking out her own outfit every morning. Denise took a photo of her on the first day standing on the front steps, gap-toothed and grinning. Lorraine still ran the laundromat on Summer Avenue. And every Saturday morning, Denise walked through the door with 2 coffees and spent an hour helping fold clothes, wipe machines, and catch up with the woman who had given her a chance when no one else would. "You don't have to keep coming, you know," Lorraine said one morning. "You've got your own life now." "I know," Denise said. "That's why I come." Then, one Saturday, a young woman walked through the laundromat door. She was maybe 22, 23. She had red eyes and messy hair, and a baby on her hip. The baby was fussing. The woman looked like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't go to the machines. She just stood by the door, looking around like she was lost, like she had walked in. Not because she needed to do laundry, but because she needed to be somewhere that was warm and didn't ask questions. Lorraine saw her first. She looked at Denise. Denise looked at the woman, and she saw herself 2 years ago, standing in a pawn shop, holding a ring, holding everything together with nothing. Denise set down her coffee. She walked over to the young woman slowly, the way you approach someone who might run. She sat down on the bench beside her and said nothing for a moment, just sat there, close enough to matter, far enough to not intrude. Then she spoke. "I don't know what you're going through, but I know what it feels like to think you have nothing left." She paused. "Can I tell you a story?" The woman looked at her. Her eyes were wet. She nodded, and Denise began. And just like that, the circle continued. This story teaches us something. 3 things, actually. First, never judge a person by their circumstances. The woman selling a ring for $12 today might be the woman changing someone's life tomorrow. You don't know where people are headed just by looking at where they are. Second, helping someone doesn't require a fortune. Marcus wasn't rich. He didn't write a check. He didn't buy her a house. He saw a woman in pain, and he paid attention. He showed up. He shared what he knew. That's it. And it changed everything. You don't need to be wealthy to make a difference. You just need to be willing to see people. Really see them. Third, letting go of something precious doesn't mean you're giving up. Sometimes the things we release in our darkest moments become the seeds of something we never could have imagined. Denise sold her ring. And that ring, that $12 ring, became the thread that connected her to Marcus, to Lorraine, to a new career, to a new life. She didn't lose her ring. She planted it. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had to give up something precious for someone you love? Have you ever been helped by a stranger when you least expected it? Have you ever been the stranger who helped? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. Every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, a single mother who's fighting alone, a father who's struggling, anyone who feels invisible, please share this video with them. You never know whose life a story can change. There's another powerful story coming very soon. So please subscribe to this channel and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss it. Thank you so much for watching. May you always find kindness when you need it most. And may you always be the kindness someone else is praying for. God bless you.